Okay, so I guess this is high time for us to start the main session. Yes, today. I think that I gave enough time for everybody to catch up with the webinar, especially those who are, were not able probably to join us at 3 sharp. And now everybody who were supposed to be here is here. So good to see you again, ladies and gentlemen. So at the very start of this session, I'd like to ask you this thing. I'd like you to think about, teaching English as a whole, right? In general. So here it comes, right? Your teaching English experience and everything. What aspects of English do we teach? So in your chat boxes, so what aspects of teaching, a different language, of teaching a foreign language do we teach when working with our students? So what's that? Okay, grammar, yeah, okay, fine, yeah, grammar. A couple of first answers with grammar there, so some grammar lovers, or some people who think that grammar is very important, which it is, obviously. Speaking and word order and vocabulary. Okay, so talking about systems, right? Vocabulary and grammar, and speaking and grammar. Okay, and listening. True. Okay, good. Yeah, pronunciation. All right. If we were talking about skills like listening and speaking, then most probably reading and writing are also there, right? Okay, so yeah, you're absolutely true. You've named many of the ones I have on the slides. Yes, you could add functions there and fluency and whatnot. And a couple of you, and yeah, some of you, Alexandra mentioned all the aspects, including cultural aspect, which is very, very important as well. Thank you, Alexandra, for that. Yeah, good. Use of English, Natalia is writing, which is both vocabulary and grammar, right? And yes, many of you, I can say, mentioned grammar, right? As this thing that links all above together, right? It's like the concrete for building blocks. So it puts all the vocabulary and lexes and whatnot together and, enables students to use language accurately. Yes? So this is what we are going to discuss today, grammar, and I'm more than sure, guys, that all of you had known that before our session started, because you were registering for this session and you were expecting it to be somehow at least connected to grammar. So the question is like that, again, for you in the chat boxes. What about yourself? Do you find teaching grammar easy? Again, in the chat boxes. No, sometimes, and no. Okay, no, lots of no answers. Good. Some yes and some sometimes. Okay, it's nice when we have different audience who think it in different ways, not always. One of my favorites, Julia wrote, okay, so depending on whether your students probably yes like that and enjoy that. Okay, all right, good. So yeah, I would still think, and I would still go for that teaching grammar is not a piece of cake, right? That, sometimes it feels for me as a teacher that we teach one and the same concept, right? One and the same structure again and again and again, and still it seems like sometimes students meet it for the first time, right? And that then still they need lots and lots of practice before they start using it actively. Okay, so today we are going to discuss, two different methods, like two bigger approaches to teaching grammar that exist today. The topic is pointing our learners in the right direction, and we're going to discuss the ways how we could present grammar to our students, how we could introduce this or that grammar structure to them. So, if I ask you, how do we teach grammar? This is where I get your thoughts back to just a couple of seconds ago, when I mentioned that there are two bigger approaches to introducing a new grammar concept to our students. Again, in the chat boxes, can you imagine, I'm sure many of you know, what are these two approaches to teaching grammar I'm talking now about here? So what are these two approaches to teaching grammar? Anybody there in the chat box? Okay, I see some of your typing. Descriptive, okay. Descriptive grammar. That's, well, quite close, I would say, when you describe how grammar functions. Okay. Prescriptive, student-centered, and teacher-centered. Okay, that's very well close to what we're going to have a look at today, actually. Student-centered and teacher-centered. Okay, let's have a look. Actually, guys, what I was meaning here is, I mean inductive and deductive approach to teaching grammar. So, you know, sometimes when you don't get into this topic very often, right? And if you ask me somewhere in the middle of the night, like which is which, or what do we call this approach and what do we call a different one, that's very different to differentiate them if you don't come across them very often. Well, at least if you don't make a presentation, if you don't make a webinar on them, which is the one we are having today. So let us have a look together at what are the differences between these two approaches to teaching grammar inductively and deductively. Okay, so let us imagine ourselves these teachers, right? Somewhere, well, Monday morning or Monday afternoon. If you teach classes in the afternoon, no problem. Well, and you're there in front of the students, standing somewhere or sitting somewhere in the middle of the class, or teaching online, if you wish. And well, you start with something. Well, you would probably start with a kind of a warm-up, talk about your students' weekend or anything, but then you would, just tell them, all right, guys, well, today, what we are going actually to talk about is present perfect. So you're going to learn some present perfect today. And then, well, we would go and explain it. We would say, all right, guys, so present perfect is the grammar tense, or is the tense which we use when talking about experiences. We usually talk about things that started in the past and still continue, well, to now, right, to the moment of speech. And then after giving them some explanations and definitions what present perfect is, you would probably say, okay, guys, how do we form present perfect? And you would use the board in the classroom, or you would share the screen if you teach online, and you would say, okay, so this is how we form it. You would put some sample sentences on the board, and you would introduce the positive and negative and interrogative form of present perfect, and then you would take them through some contractions and short answers and everything, right? And after that, what is a very obvious thing that would happen, you would say, okay, guys, now we'll practice it. And you would tell them to open the book at a certain page, or you would say, okay, so these are some worksheets for you to do some multiple choice, some gap fill, some open the brackets, controlled practice activities, yes, with them. So basically what has happened by now in our lesson is that, well, grammar presentation took place, yes, by means of explanation. So the teacher we introduced present perfect, and we explained how it works, and we gave out the form, and then the students were taken straight into some controlled practice activities. Let's open the brackets and all that stuff. So the question from me is this, guys. What about yourself? Again, in the chat boxes, please put yes or no, plus or minus, if you teach grammar following this scenario. So again, in the chat boxes, just a quick yes or no if you teach grammar using this scenario. Okay, mostly, and yes, and a plus, and another plus. Okay, lots of positive answers, it seems, quite often. All right. Okay. Lots of pluses and plus and minus. Yeah, so sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Okay, and often and sometimes. This is like lots of you use it, and well, I see no problem with that basically. And actually, I saw one participant there, Tatiana Gabrin. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, who wrote that it's a deductive way, not so interesting for students. And Tatiana, thank you very much for giving the name. And actually, yes, if you remember, I was telling you we're going to have a look at two broad approaches, which were deductive and inductive. Yes, this is the scenario that usually happens when you teach using a deductive approach. Well, basically, this is a deductive approach to teaching grammar. And I see that many of you use it. And well, let us have a look at some, well, features of this approach, right? So these are not going to be the only features that characterize a deductive approach to teaching grammar. However, these are, well, just a couple of them I wanted to drag your attention to, okay? So what's going to happen now, I'm going to show you, well, two options, A and B. And in your chat boxes, please choose which you think characterizes is the characteristic, right, of the deductive approach to teaching grammar. So let us have a look at first two. So what do you think? Is it a teacher-led approach or it is student-centered one? What do you think? Is it more about, well, the teacher there being in the center of attention and then leading the class, or students? Okay. All right. Thank you. It seems like 99%, well, maybe 95, are thinking that it's a teacher-led one. And yeah, so this is one of the characteristics where you remember this possible beginning of the lesson that I just, well, kind of played with you there at the beginning, that the teacher is there and the teacher announces the topic and gives the explanation and presents students with the form and everything. So yes, it's quite teacher-led. So the teacher is under control of what's happening. So you know for sure what's going to happen next, what information about grammar your students are going to learn in the lesson. All right, what about these two? Is it indirect or direct, this deductive approach? What do you think? Is it, well, quite a straightforward approach to teaching grammar, or you kind of leave some room for student suggestion and thinking over things and just predicting what this or that grammar structure is about? So it seems like lots of B options. Okay, yes, it's quite direct. So you don't leave your students room for any suggestion. You teach them, okay, guys, this is present perfect. This is how it functions. This is the form. Okay, now go and practice it. So, well, your students don't need, to double think anything because you give them the information there. Okay, fantastic. What about this one? What do you think? Is it time saving or time consuming? All right, A or B in the chat box. Do you think you as a teacher save a lot of time for explanation, or you spend more? All right. Okay, it seems like lots of you think it's A. There are some B options as well. Okay. Well, what I still go for, guys, is that it's quite time saving. Of course, you may say that, well, it depends on the topic. Yes, if the topic is really difficult, and if students, well, meet grammar for the first time, it might take some time. Well, of course, it could. However, if you think, well, if you have a look at, well, first two features, yes, that it is teacher-led, and you're controlling all the things that are happening in class, and that it is very direct. You teach it and they get down to practice. Then we might still say, and we might still assume that it would, well, take less time, especially compared, well, to another approach that we are going to have a glimpse at, well, just now. So, well, if we have a look at these three features, yes, that you're under control, it's very direct, they get straight to practice, and if it is time saving, well, are these some good features? Well, oh yes, they are, right? Well, absolutely good features, and there is no, well, idea why I think that somebody could neglect this approach and say, well, yeah, I never use it, because you save time. Well, your students get the very correct information, and, well, consequently, they might get a lot of practice with it. So some very nice features about it. Meanwhile, however, what this gentleman said, and again, in the chat boxes, who knows his name? I'm sure all of you know, but who has the fastest typing skills ever here today in this wonderful audience? And Franklin, yeah, Larissa Ridina was the first one, Benjamin Franklin, Diana, yes, all right, good. Yeah, like this gentleman said once, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember. And again, what's the missing verb here? Anybody, again, with maybe fast typing skills? Yes, Oksana Karachun was the first one, and lots of you catching up with Oksana, coming up with a very correct verb here, involve me and I learn. So compared, well, the approach that we are going to have a look now at, which is called, well, the alternative to deductive inductive approach. Well, this is the difference between this approach and the deductive one, that while teaching grammar inductively, we involve our students into the process of learning as much as possible. So let us have a look at what this approach is about, how it is different to a deductive one that we have just had a look at. And then maybe, well, just maybe, at the end, well, closer to the end of this session, we will come up with the answer, which one is better, right? Inductive or deductive. Not now, but a bit later. So, well, actually, very often this inductive approach is called, in a different way. Anybody, again, in the chat box? Well, what do you think what name do you think I'm driving you at with having Sherlock Holmes with this magnifying glass on the slide? Anybody could think of what another name? Oh, yes, Diana Boyka. It's glad that we have a couple of people with very fast typing skills there, and Diana now is the first one with the answer here. Thank you, Diana. So it's very often, I mean, this inductive approach is very often called a guided discovery or a discovery approach to, well, teaching grammar, for example. Okay, so let us have a look at it. And we're going to have a look at it, well, again, by means of teaching present perfect. And it very often comes together with past simple. So still the same grammar structure, right? As we were looking at you with the deductive approach, let's see what are the real differences when using this method with your students. Okay, and as the material for this part of the session, I used Speak Out, second edition, intermediate. So this is B1 plus level book. And this is one of our best-selling resources, one of our best-selling titles for our adult learners, actually. All right. So guys, have a look at these people, 8 of them on this slide. And again, in the chat box, can you please write anybody who you recognize? Any name, any last name of the people you recognize here on the slide? Will Smith was the first one, yes. Helen Mirren, maybe, yes, it's her. It's Helen Mirren on the very left, well, top corner there. Yeah, President Bush, Queen Elizabeth, and Muhammad Ali, yes, Olga mentioned, yes, true, and Helen Mirren again, President Bush, okay, Mirren, Queen, and Bush, yeah, true. Okay, what about these ladies in the in the left bottom corner. What about those? Audrey, yeah, Audrey something. Olga, true. That's Audrey Tattoo. Yeah, Audrey. And who's next to her? And yes, and Tatiana Shostak wrote that Coco Chanel. So next to Audrey Tattoo, it's Coco Chanel. And the one next to President Bush is Josh Brolin. Okay. Good. So perfect. You know all the people here, or well, collaboratively we remembered all these gentlemen and ladies here. Good. What about, why do you think I have these pairs of, well, famous people? They're all famous, right? Why do you have these pairs on the slide? What do you think the connection between them is? Again, in your chat boxes, any predictions? Any predictions would do? Common things. What do you mean by common things, Maya? Nationality? A nice guess that they could be of the same nationality, a probability. Thank you, Olga, for that. Relatives. Well, why not? Why not? The actors who played them, Diana Boyka wrote. Yeah, possibility. And actors who played them, Natalia, movie actors. Oh, now. Oh, yes, now many of you are driving. And what they have in common. Yeah, okay, Maya, thank you for a bit more detail there. Thank you very much. So yeah, but I think, yes, some of you have already driven to the topic that, well, the topic here is actually Hollywood versus history. And yes, these are, well, the actors who played their famous counterparts. Yes, who played famous people from history. Okay, good. So, well, by now, even now knowing, yes, that, well, we are going to discuss some grammar teaching, right, in an inductive approach or a guided discovery, whichever way you prefer. This is just a great context for me to drag you right into the topic of the lesson. So, well, we're still talking about grammar, but however, the context is nice. Yes, we've activated all your Hollywood film experiences by naming the actors, and you were making predictions about their relation. Well, fantastic. And this is the context, yes, setting activity at the beginning of class there. All right. What you could continue with possibly here, and this is what Speak Out does actually. So it says, listen to the first part of a radio program about films and answer the questions. And here are the two questions. What type of film does the program talk about? Why are these films so popular? Actually, again, in the chat box, another question for you guys. What do we call these films? What do we call films where actors star some real people from history? What is the name for these films? Biography, this is a possibility. Olga, thank you. Historical, documentary. But there is, you know, even a bit more accurate way. Oh yeah, Larissa, Rivina, thank you again for mentioning that. So biopics. Yes, actually, these films are called biopics. However, well, with a slight change in definition, I guess it could be called a documentary and historical drama, right? And what else you had there in biography? Okay, but yeah, well, basically they're called biopics. So at this moment, what I would do with my students, right, after what we've done with you, after the pictures and predictions, they would listen to a radio program, yes, and answer these two questions, which are not still about present perfect and past simple, right? They've got nothing to do with that. So at this point, still no grammar, right? My students are still in this feeling of suspense, probably, what type of lesson they're going to go through. Yes, what would be the focus? So still at this point, no grammar. However, what my students do get together with this activity, right, together with the listening activity, is that they've got a lot of exposure to language, some real language. people discussing these biopics and discussing actors playing the roles and how these actors met these people from these historical figures and how they prepared for their role. So they got a lot of great exposure to all the different language there. What about target language? What about present perfect and past simple? Yes, you could ask me, is there any? Well, of course there is. So obviously this listening activity, this text comes together with lots of grammar there, with lots of present perfect and past simple. However, this is not still in focus, right, of students' attention. So they still work on the meaning of the of this listening activity, and it's got a lot of meaning, right? People communicating and discussing this thing, and teaching grammar or students getting exposed to grammar happens implicitly. Yes, so they don't expect yet that this is the focus, that this is the target grammar. However, they listen to lots of situations and they could spot the time slots and basically what is being discussed there in this listening activity. And even then, yet another activity here, which is listening to the rest of the program, because what they earlier did, it was just part of a radio program. Here they need to listen to the rest of it and complete the information in the gaps here. And even now, guys, so we haven't listened to it with you now, but well, you could just trust and believe me that still the information that is missing is not about grammar. So it is still about all the meaningful information, all the meaningful ideas that come together with context, that come together with a good piece of a listening activity, right? However, you see that these sentences are not any sentences from the listening, right? These are the sentences that do contain target grammar, which do contain present perfect and past simple. And in this way, we could, as teachers, right, isolate the language for our students. So now they can read it, yes, isolated in a sentence and feel a bit better how this or that grammar is used, right? And only then, after we have involved our students with pictures and with context and with their predictions, and we did a couple of listening activities, and there was lots of context and lots of real context. Yes, because all these films are a reality. Yes, they do exist, and you could always tell your students to watch them and whatever. Only then, yes, we start introducing grammar. So this is the focal point, so to say, where your students might have a first understanding of, oh, okay, this is about present perfect and past simple. And here we could design it, and actually in Speak Out, it is designed in a very, very smart way. So let us have a look at this one. So it starts with, read the sentences from exercise 4A and underline the examples of present perfect and past simple, right? So this is where the students are taken back to the previous exercise and they research these sentences that were isolated from the listening activity. And well, I'm sure that all of you would say, well, of course, well, this is quite an obvious thing to happen, because by this moment, well, you remember that this is Speak Out Intermediate B1. And we as teachers understand that, well, our students might have already experienced some present perfect in their lives and past simple for sure. So this is how, with the help of this activity, that we elicit the language from our students, right? We elicit what they know by now, right? So go back and underline, and we as teachers have a look at what they are doing and see if they basically underline the right things, right? If they probably know by now the form of present perfect and past simple. What happens afterwards is only now they are taken, or well, they work out the rules on their own, and it continues with something like complete the rules with present perfect and past simple. They're given the definitions, and now, well, they are very ready to judge. Yes, after all our input, they're ready to work it out on their own, what the rule is. And well, very often at this stage of the lesson, I would put my students into pairs or smaller groups. Especially, I would pair up a weaker student and a stronger student if I know that the weaker student could experience some problems. And this is where the peer teaching and peer help and peer support would happen without much interference on my side. Yes, this is where I would still try to make it as student-centered as possible. And even then, what they're asked is that they're asked to look at the sentences in exercise 4A again, and now match all the sentences with the rules that they've just worked out on their own or together with their partners. So this is how, right, here at this stage, grammar presentation happens. What about us? You could ask me now, well, what about, or even actually not you, but I would ask you guys. It's vice versa, not you, but I would ask you, what about the teacher? Where is the teacher here? Because, well, by now it seems like all the things are happening done by students themselves. So again, in your chat box, can you write, what is the role of the teacher? What is the teacher doing? Are we just, enjoying our life somewhere at the back of the classroom with a cup of coffee? Or, well, we are doing some other things? Okay. All right. So Diana mentioned monitoring. Yes, and Jen, coaching, yeah? Coaching, I guess. Sorry for that mispronunciation. I guess coaching would be a better word. Yes, monitoring and checking, facilitating in a road. Okay, good. Assisting, leading and directing, monitoring plus helping. Okay, fantastic, guys. Thank you very much for all those very correct verbs there in the chat box. Fantastic. Well, what a great audience I have for helping me out with all these things. And this is, well, excellent, to know that you all know that. And I think that many of you, most of you, or all of you, do use this approach as well in your teaching practice. And all the things that you've mentioned in the chat box, this monitoring, helping, assisting, leading, and checking, these are all very important roles of teacher, right? Together with, well, teaching itself. Okay, thank you very much. Good. That's very, very correct. So basically what happened by now here in this lesson? So we started it all with the context, yes? Some Hollywood actors, some historical figures, and some predictions. Then the students were exposed to language in the context of a listening activity, yes, and in the context of biopics. Then the learners were working out the rules on their own, yes, after listening to this audio a couple of times and being exposed implicitly to grammar. And obviously, the teacher is always there confirming and helping and monitoring and all those things there. And only then, as well, compared to the previous approach, to a deductive approach, the students still inevitably should have some time to get down to some controlled practice activities, to some open the brackets and fill in the gaps and multiple choice and true, false, and whatever you could think there. So what about the features, right? Let us have a look at what are the features of this guided discovery approach. I pointed out. However, again, these are not the only one that exists. So here the language is presented in context. Yes, so this is how it is different. In a deductive approach, it happens sometimes by the means of some sample sentences. But if we talk about a context, a reading one or a listening one, or very often you could play a video, right? If you have a video containing this target language. So this serves as good context, some meaningful context for students to start with. Then it is obviously more student-centered and communicative. There are lots of opportunities for us as teachers to put students into pairs, to let them work it out on their own, to let them work with the material first, right? And be exposed to language as much as possible without us only showing the way. And well, as I always tell my students is that if you work out, guys, something on your own, it will probably stay in your head longer. Yes, so discovery approach enhances remembering. Yes, I can say, well, I think that this is a very important thing about guided discovery as well. However, right, one of the tricks, or one of the disadvantages of this approach, I would say that sometimes your students could be guided in the wrong direction. Yes, because here we try to make our students come up with some correct answers, right, with the correct meanings, with the correct rules, but they might drive at a false conclusion, right? And this is where we need still to try and guide them and deal with all the problems. And like you've mentioned in the chat box, help and assist and guide and whatever. So if I ask you now, guys, again in your chat boxes, to go for one of them, which do you think is better? After we have had a broader look at two of them, which do you think is best? Deductive approach or guided discovery? Again, in the chat boxes, guided discovery, teaching, and again, guided discovery, and okay, in B, guided discovery, and combination from, I didn't remember who, it depends on the group, it depends on the material, guided discovery, depending on the audience. It seems like no one goes for deductive as being best. No, both. Okay, combination. Okay, guys, a guided one. It facilitates critical thinking, in my opinion. Yeah, well, it does, Olga. Yeah, agree. Okay. All right, thank you guys for answering. And I still would agree, I think, with, well, 50%, let me judge it like that, with 50% of you there writing that a combination of both and that it depends. So this is what I would really go for, that, well, basically, what a great resource, what a great teaching material, for instance, like a Speak Out that I've used is, what it is great because it has both options. In the main unit, you would have great samples of discovery approach. However, well, in the grammar reference at the end of the book, you would still have a deductive approach to teaching grammar, where there would be quite a lot of theory with some practice afterwards. So I think a good resource combines two these methods. And I agree with many of you who have written that it depends, really. It depends on the level of your students. It depends whether your students encounter this grammar for the first time in their lives or not. Well, if the grammar you are teaching is generally difficult or not, it depends on time. Very, very much it depends on time, I would say, because can you remember yourself back in April and May? Did you have every time when teaching grammar some time for a guided discovery approach? Come on, tell me the truth. Because, well, we were very short on time, and we were rushing through the material as quickly as possible, and it is impossible to set every single time when pressed for time, a guided discovery way of doing things. That's why you resort back to a deductive approach and you teach it in this way. So it really depends on a couple of factors, but I would go for that. Both of them are completely fine to be used, even if you prefer this or that approach. We need to use a combination of these two. And then, as I have already mentioned, whichever approach you choose, would it be deductive or guided discovery, it still all ends up with practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. There should be much of controlled practice activities for our students to be able then to use grammar accurately enough, right? So here, what I'd like to share with you is our fantastic book that is called My Grammar Lab, which is not only a fantastic book, but it's fantastic resource and material to not only practice but teach grammar as well. Let me show you why I say that it's not just a book, but it's material really, and much more to it than you could think at first. One thing I'd like to mention, guys, is that what a lot of my colleagues, teachers of English, adore is that every single module in My Grammar Lab is topic-based. So it's not only about a certain grammar topic like nouns and articles, possessives, prepositions, but every single module has a certain vocabulary topic for students to learn. So what automatically means that it's got a lot of very meaningful exercises for students, because together with nouns and articles, they would learn a lot about museums and galleries all around the world. They would learn much about food and drink in different countries, about traveling experiences, about animals and stuff. So topic-based modules is something fantastic I find about the book. Another thing that, well, we were just talking about, that context is absolutely invaluable when teaching grammar and when learning grammar correspondently. And there are lots of activities that are very meaningful because they come in dialogues, they come in listening texts, they come in reading texts. So the students see how grammar functions there. And actually, well, Maya Virimema wrote, I've got them all. Maya, thank you very much. Well, hopefully, well, judging by a couple of smiles there, you enjoy working with this material. Thank you for that. So context is really important, as we've discussed. Well, at the same time, nothing's gonna skip, no theory, not a single rule or exception is going to skip your students, right? So there are rules, examples, exceptions. Everything is very visual for students to see and to basically to navigate through the theoretical material of the book. And obviously, like any good book, it would have loads of practice activities. This is what we were mentioning just at the end of the previous blog, that practice makes perfect, and students need to have lots of samples, lots of different exercises to practice it. And you know, by now, what many of you might say, well, Gennady, well, it does look like a very solid book to work for our students to work on grammar. Yeah, and I would say, yes, you're complete. Yes, true. And what you could ask me, okay, what is special about it? Anything special? Well, actually, there is. And well, I'm sure that many of you know already what I mean by it being special, because, well, it's not called My Grammar Lab for no reason, so to say. So My Grammar Lab comes together with a scratch code with just, well, almost, I can say, limitless possibilities for students and for teachers working with it online. And you have a chance to work on the platform My English Lab, and it lets you create classroom wherever you have Wi-Fi or even mobile internet is fine there. So it gives you lots and lots of different benefits. So just if we go over them, what I mean by that is that, well, there are even more practice activities online. Not a single activity there online repeats the one that comes in the paper version of the book. So these are totally different. And I can tell you, even if you have just a glimpse at it one time, you would agree with me that there are like hundreds of them. So even more opportunities for your students to start using grammar in a more accurate way. Another great feature of it is that obviously when creating a class and when your students join it, everybody gets instant scores. Whether you are a teacher, like I'm having you today, or your students, well, everything that is done there on the platform is automatically checked by the system. Not only checked, it doesn't only give you the score, but it gives you a very thorough analysis of what your students were doing when practicing their grammar, how much time they spent, how many attempts they used, what their strong and strengths and weaknesses are. So lots of different data for you to be able to really see how your students are doing. Video grammar presentations, well, they're fantastic when you're not around, when you're not available, when I understand it happens not very often. Yes, often teachers are available almost 24/7. Yes, especially when we talk about distance learning. Yes, but here you're not around. The students could always switch on the video presentation, watch a wonderful British speaker explaining the rules, giving the samples, and just taking through some theory there. And my favorite, like one of you wrote, yes, you were writing about something of your favorite there. Well, my favorite is that my students, can improve results using this platform. And actually, this is the official statistics by Pearson that on average, the students who use this platform improve their scores and improve their skills and knowledge by 10 to 15%. And this happens by means of you as a teacher giving your students a couple of attempts to do the task. So you could set 2 attempts, or if grammar is very difficult, 3 attempts for your students to do the task. It automatically makes your students studying at home or studying on their own longer. Yes, so they don't do it just once and never know what the result is. They do it once, they see where they have problems, and they self-analyze and self-correct and self-learn. And this is fantastic thing, guys. As soon as you learn it as a teacher, you can't refuse using it in the future. So this is a fantastic thing about the platform. So my grammar lab, I think, is a must-have for everyone of you and your students when it gets down to practicing grammar. And not only practicing, you saw that it has video presentations and context-based activities. And like all of you, like Maya mentioned, having all 3 of them, I think, deserve to have it in your collection and using it with your students. Ми наближаємося до завершення нашого заходу. Я надзвичайно вдячний вам за те, що ви доєднались до нього, доєднались до чергового вебінару від Internal Education. На екрані ви бачите контакти, за якими ви можете зв'язатись з нами і отримати абсолютно вичерпну і всю консультацію з будь-яких матеріалів, які є у видавництва Pearson, і іспитів, яке пропонує це видавництво, і всіх інших послуг освітніх, які є у нашій компанії. Це і різні тренінги, і довші тренінги, і партнерські програми, і є багато чого вам запропонувати. Всі ви, звісно, отримуєте сертифікати участі. Будь ласка, будьте терплячими. Іноді вони приходять десь за тиждень. У нас зараз багато різних подій онлайн, тому, можливо, доведеться трішки зачекати. Іноді сертифікати приходять у такі улюблені скриньки, як спам або рекламації на Gmail. Тому, будь ласка, перевіряйте ці скриньки. Проте, якщо все ж таки ви не знайшли свій заслужений абсолютно сертифікат, будь ласка, напишіть або зателефонуйте нам. Ще раз з нашими контактами, ось і info@internal.com.ua, за якими ви можете до нас звернутися. Якщо ви подивитесь зверху у чат-боксі, це повідомлення нікуди не рухається, воно там. Зверніться до нас, якщо у вас виникли якісь труднощі з отриманням сертифікату. Доєднуйтесь до нас на в наших соціальних мережах: Facebook, Instagram, наш методичний сайт eltdinternal.com.ua, для того, щоб дізнаватись про всі новинки, про найостанніші події, які відбуваються у житті нашої великої освітньої компанії. Наразі, Оленко, скажи мені, будь ласка, і допоможи мені, якщо у нас буде невеличка буквально сесія, чомусь не можу переключити, запитань-відповідей. Якщо були якісь запитання, Оленко, будь ласка, по шері. Так. Ось, ага, дякую тобі, Олена. Дякую. Так, отже, Геннадій, так, виділили мене, зараз буде щось серйозне. How does it work in terms of access and passwords? How many devices can I use it on? And how can I have several students working with the system online? Do I get an account and a limited number of users? Дякую вам, пані Ксенію, за запитання. Все дуже слушно. А стосовно кодів і паролей, у кожному підручнику MyGrammarLab, ось абсолютно у кожному є скретч-код. І в книзі для вчителя також ви, як вчитель, створюєте кабінет онлайн, доєднуєте до нього, а в нас є, до речі, всі, я попрошу зараз Оленку, якщо десь там Юля, можливо, поруч сидить. Ось, Олена, по-перше, у чат-боксі розмістила, дякую тобі, Олена, телефони моєї колеги Юлії Киянець, яка в нас опікує